All right. You know what it is? You know who it is? We're back. Another episode of the Skinny Boy Says podcast. So today I have a legend, James Fitzgerald, on. I know you guys have heard me talk about OPEX a lot. You've heard me talk about the OPEX certification that I took, that I'm currently finishing up. But James is the owner and founder of OPEX, and this is an awesome experience for me to kind of sit down and talk with him. So James, I want you to give a brief background on yourself. I know a lot about you, but I want the people to know that are listening to know about you and just kind of go from there.
Yeah, you started by calling me a legend, so it immediately gives me an old vibe.
It's more about the
I'm
wisdom, not the.
old. Thank you. I'm older than most inside the fitness experience,
Yeah,
I guess, or I guess in regards to people talking about it.
I'm
Um,
young too, so that's different.
okay, yeah. I'm 46. I got a great marriage. I have two wonderful daughters, 14, 11 years of age. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm a Canadian with, I guess, Canadian roots, becoming an American. I'm in Idaho right now. I live here in the summertime
Okay.
to get away from the heat. And I started physical expression and through sport as a young kid, and fell in love with it, and then turned that into learning more about it in an academic way. Been practicing, I guess, in the practice of coaching since the mid 90s. I'm pretty proud to say that I've stuck it out and still been involved based upon that. And leads us to today, where I'm founder of let's call it a global fitness education company. Sounds so profound,
Yeah.
but it's been a long journey. It's been a lot of fun. So
Yeah, I'm always, people always ask me about OPEX because I'm always talking up you guys and talking about, just the theories and the methods that you guys use and the principles that you guys have. And I've adopted a lot of them within my own
solid.
training and then the people that I deal with. And after the certification, that was one of my biggest stepping points for me, was taking the CCP and kind of going through it. And
Great.
I always have kind of a hard time explaining it because it is so, like, it's so all encompassing. Like, it involves so much with what you guys do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think it's hard explaining it as well, which is, it's kind of ironic that it's hard to explain. But
yeah,
what I mean by that is that none of it's mine, right? And none of it's OPEX.
yeah,
We're making people aware of principles,
yeah,
right? And reality, right? And honesty and truth. And I think that's why it's hard, is that it's very challenging to implement that in current times.
yeah,
That's why I think it seemingly looks profound,
yeah,
but it's not. It's principles,
yeah. And I
like
think that,
you can't work out 3 times a day.
yeah,
It's like, oh well, who told you that that's not the case? Well, we've tried it and it doesn't work.
yeah,
And by the way, it's principle.
yeah,
Humans can only do so much in this. So it's things like that. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. And then coaches leave and they try to get out. It's a little tougher.
yeah. And like, kind of, I want to get into OPEX and, when you started it, how you started it, because
Okay.
some of you may not know, but James was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were the first CrossFit Games champion, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So he was the
2007. Yep.
first official CrossFit Games champion. If you guys follow
It's
CrossFit,
official.
yeah. And in terms of, I know you had a background with CrossFit and then you kind of branched off and did your own thing. And in terms of, being a part of CrossFit and then starting OPEX, what was that like, and why was it that you decided to kind of branch off and do your own thing?
Yeah, so I started before I got into CrossFit. So just so
Okay.
we know where
So
these things lie.
OPEX was before you left CrossFit, or it was
Oh my gosh, yeah, yeah. I've
okay.
been
Okay.
I've been coaching since '94, and I started my business in Calgary as established in '99,
Okay.
and then I started practicing.com and CrossFit in 2004.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's less around to move away from where things sit and what leads to it, but I think that's a part of the story that a lot of people forget,
I
that
was
I
under the
think,
intention that you were a part of CrossFit. That was a misunderstanding on my part. Yeah.
yeah, not whatsoever. So I think that's important. So I'm glad you asked the
Yeah.
question, I
Yeah.
can clarify it just so people know where the roots come from, because I think that's important, right? So I saw, when I started doing that in 2004, I saw the practice and the methodology of a really interesting way to do work, a new, different, interesting way to do work. And I adopted it and, wrapped my hands around and played with it and scienced the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And then saw that it could be really complementary to my current principles, So I think of like the principles were in place, and then I layered and colored all those principles with different modalities. And that's the way I perceived it. So it's almost like saying, there was only one endurance program and that was for running, which actually was the case, right? And now there becomes cycling and kayaking and skiing, etc. And now that's what I saw CrossFit as underneath the principle of running, right? Is all these different ways of expressing the exact same thing, right? So work is work, gain, pain, sustain.
Yep.
How you express that, I saw CrossFit as like a new, interesting, color to that, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I don't think answering the question, I think, that you previously asked. So can you ask that again? Because I got kind of hooked up on the origination of
So, I guess clarifying now, because I know that you weren't, but what made you, when you did start OPEX, what was and was it originally called OPEX?
OPT.
OPT, yeah, that's what I thought. So when you initially started OPT, where were you picturing it heading, and then why did you start it, and what was kind of the reason behind that? And you kind of answered that with you saw something in fitness that was different, and you took it to a different level, obviously, by being a games champion, and like you took yourself to a different level, and that experience brings you within reaching new heights, and then finding things to bring down and make principle, and then find principle and express it. So basically on that end of things.
Well, I don't know that I really have a good answer to your question, really, on what I proposed to, what I wanted it to look like, if that makes sense, when I started. So when I started is still kind of loose, but it was, I just knew there was one intention, that I really liked fitness. And I loved the concept of physical expression. So how that was in my life just came about through vocation, So, and then now over time, I speak of it virtuously around contribution, or, the collective area in which I can impact. Right.
Yeah.
But I can't, I couldn't have said that when I was 22, what I'm saying, or when I was 19 and depressed with, an injury.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said, I can tell this is definitely going to be a precipice to turn my life around, right? And to transform my mind. So I think my intentions to start off is pretty trite. Actually, it was like, just, I was doing what I was supposed to do. Like, I'm in kinesiology. I guess I'm going to be a trainer. That's honestly the intention. So I didn't have any of those grandiose plans, but I can tell you one thing, and I'll end on that, is that I definitely knew that I loved the concept of physical expression, because that's what I experienced in my life, right? Like I experienced going through the hardship and the work hardening of coming out of this doldrum in my life, that I couldn't turn my back on it. I knew it was a seminal moment that was like going to be embedded in me for my time, being around. So.
Now, I guess, and another question that stems from this, now I've been talking about this a lot, because in terms of business, and you guys have a great business section, but like making this a career now is an idea, and like it's something that's common. Now, when you probably started, was this something that you were like, I'm going to make a career out of this? Or was this something that you were like, I'm just going to do this until I figure out the next step?
No, definitely, definitely not. Because remember, I was in the early years of it, so there was lots of work to go around. So there was it was just like, you're going to go to university, you're going to be a trainer, and that's going to be your job. Like there was no like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, So there was never even thought for planning, which was ironically the biggest upheaval as to what's the technical proficiency that keeps people from actually being successful today is what? No business savvy, right? So, but I love the wording you chose there. I haven't used that before, so I'm going to use it. Thank you for that. Is that it's an idea, that it actually is an idea today, which makes me at least, think about the fact that it has to become an idea, and I'm not sure if that's where you wanted to go with it, but it's complete madness really
Well,
today,
like I said,
for
there's
fitness and business and what that looks like. Because
yeah,
let's just say there's competencies that gained on behalf of a human, right? There's competence that they like embed in their brain, right?
yeah,
To be able to actually take that and let's call it the practice of teaching people those competencies so
yeah,
that that individual gets autonomy and all these great things that come from the teaching of the health guru,
yeah, yeah,
then to put that into action today is madness.
yeah, and
It's absolute madness.
that's why, because I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and I've had some really good conversations over the past couple of weeks with some great people within the industry, and like it's tough because a lot of these people have these careers in fitness now, and
Mm-hmm.
like 10 years ago even it was something that was like personal training was seen as like a stepping stone to just make some money and then get out.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of like you know the way I learned remote coaching from you guys, the way that I learned about coaching in general and learned about how to actually set myself up to make this a career, I don't think was something, again, I was a teenager 10 years ago and I was in school. So it wasn't something I was like fully thinking about, but like seeing about the people that I've talked to and kind of hearing what it was like 10 years ago in the industry was like, yeah, it was something. And like, you could do it. And, there was some lucrative people who got some stuff from it and like made their careers out of it. But there was a lot of also, I'm going to do this for a little bit just to make it to the next step. And like, I think about it now because when I graduated college in 2017 and, I opened a gym and then, I recently left that gym, but being in that position was like, I don't know that I would have been able to see that as like a career. And I had some
Mm-hmm.
awesome people to learn from. And Dean,
Yeah.
he did the open, yeah. He was one of my first like coaching mentors.
Okay.
And after I started talking with him and like learning from him was kind of that step where I was like, yeah, I can actually make this a career. And that's when started looking into it. Like, how do I make this a career? And like, I know there's a lot more people in my shoes where they're just starting, they're just learning, they're just figuring out what they want to do. And like, for me, I can't imagine myself in any other field. So I just, like I said, it's hard for me to imagine 10 years ago what it's like when there's really no direction for it and there's no sustainability within it.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
I get to, sit here and do this and try to make a career off of it and talk to people like you who have, pioneered almost the way to make it a career. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of, where I was going with that. And it's cool when you're able to see people succeed at the highest level with it. And, you don't often, and like I said, this is new. This is fairly new, and there's a lot of new in the industry, and there's a lot of growth that's happened within the past 5 years. So that's kind of where I was trying to get your insight on and see how it's grown for you.
Yeah. Well, how it's grown for me is my own individual story. Maybe you can pull me back to that after this, but
Yeah,
I wanted to just mention that, you know, the, I think it should just make sense though, that there's since, there's a a lot of people have been born in 1990 to 1996 that are
yeah,
currently inside of the market for fitness.
it's me.
Let's call it the market for fitness. Yeah.
Yeah,
But they're currently there, and so we have to remember how do they perceive the world socially and culturally, and like what is
yeah,
observed, right?
yeah,
And I was born in 1974. Just to give an n=2 difference, right?
yeah,
Is like this embedded agreement that it was going to be your career. There's no other choice. But just imagine the difference in thinking, right?
yeah,
From 90 to 96. You come out of university, and this was not the case in our lens, right? In my
no,
lens, so you can think about it, right? In like
yeah,
1997, 99, 1998, it's like, it's actually, you actually were perceived culturally to be insignificant and inconsistent. If you were
yeah.
to say, I'm just going to experiment for 3 years and then maybe shift work and learn this thing online and then go and do like, if you were to speak that
Yeah.
in the late 90s, you'd be like, you're out to lunch, man.
Now you're called an
That's
entrepreneur. That's
adultery.
the
You know what I'm saying? So, but the reason why I raise this is that this is the thing that I continue to struggle with, and I don't propose to have the answers to that. But the the fitness coach and the success of the fitness coach has to really be drawn out in the definition of success, right?
yeah,
Like what that means. And I talk about this on CCP, but
yeah,
like the definition of it is really connected to a neo generalist trade that you do for 50 to 60 years.
Yeah.
Like that. And the more you walk away from that, maybe that's the wrong words, not walk away, but the more you don't want to accept that as the definition of success for coaching, and spend a lot of time thinking about, well, why would you say 50 years? Well, because I've only had 25 of them, and I
Hmm.
can tell you, I actually haven't learned enough yet to
Yeah.
make it 50 years.
Yeah.
So you have to then see, well, what are you defining as success? And if I'm defining success as ultimate capability of each person that comes in front of me to get to autonomy, that's a big problem that part-time job is not going to fix. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this is, this is where, that's why I say it's madness, because to your point, there's no regulation on what the job is.
Yep.
There's 18 different service offerings in which everyone's classified under one roof.
Yep.
Even AI is considered a personal trainer now.
Yeah.
We've even lost the human aspect of it. There's no coach attribute or value, booklet that we all have to abide by
Yeah.
anymore. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's I'm just mentioning that to jump inside of like the coach's job and
Yeah.
vocation means. That's why I simply just leave it at madness.
Yeah.
Now, from my perspective coming through, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. When I started, it was like, I don't know, this is just what you do, I guess. I mean, I deeply knew about physical expression, and how do I use this as a medium? Oh,
Yeah.
you do training. Okay, cool. Oh my shit, I'm getting paid for that. Oh, I guess I better buy a house and have a family. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's the train of thought I had, because there was only like one way. What are you doing? I'm a trainer. What do you do? I train people. Oh, you make money on that? Yeah. Yeah. You have a family too? Oh yeah. Well, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
There's one path, but now there's, like, as I said, 37 different options, and
Yeah.
we're not even really sure what fitness means anymore.
Exactly.
Or
Yeah. And that's, that's the, I think that's one of the best things I got from OPEX and CCP was defining that longevity within fitness, and like defining that fitness is what that person needs it to be, essentially. And like, that was the biggest thing for me, because at that point I was, I started, and I've been following you guys for probably like 4 or 5 years at this point. And like, it was tough because I was in CrossFit, and like there's languages thrown around, there's other fitness expressions that are thrown around, and you're like, oh, like this seems to be okay. And like, I was in a CrossFit gym for a while, and there was a lot of like, oh, that I don't know if that should be happening, or like, this doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right. And then, finding that definition from you guys and kind of being able to express that in a lot of ways helped me. And, it was something that was a problem for me early on. And, one of my next questions for you in terms of all of this was like, what was your biggest hurdle coming from the start? And like, kind of until you found that, because there was probably a point in your life where it was beginning, and then, figuring it out until you're like, okay, yes, like this is starting to make sense. So like, what was the biggest hurdle early on into kind of finding that, or
Uh,
finding your definition of success, I guess?
yeah, good one. I was going to be lost on that, but yeah, it's time. I know that's a short answer, but it takes time, because you got to have a lot of iterations. You got to have a lot of experiences. You got to do a lot of tripping up and a lot of mistakes and a
Yeah.
lot of success. So you got to do all of those. So I guess I'm making it simple. I'm afraid of making it simple because I'm usually verbose in my answer, but
Mm-hmm.
it's taken 25 years.
Yeah.
It's taken that, where I can say, oh, now I'm actually wrapping my hands around how to define success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been an injected value, right? It's been injected, a societal injection as a construct as to what value is,
Yeah.
keeping up with the Joneses, and, you're happy at the end of the day, and the picket fence, and, et cetera. It's
Yeah.
like, is that really successful? Like, what are you? And so how do I figure that out? I got to take time. It's got to take 10 years. I got to have 2 children. I have to see their birth. I have to experience relationships. I have to lose clients. I have to gain clients. Like, all of that leads to me going, so the definition of success needs to have an anchor point,
Yeah.
right? And an awareness. And then when you start with that, and then if you figure out that the person actually doesn't even, and I'll just use the example of someone who's 20 years of
Mhm.
age, they may not even be able to compute
Yeah.
the concept of that. So how do I meet them where they're at for success? Is basically, do you get out of bed tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Make your bed, help people out, contribute. That's the current definition of success.
Mhm.
And so over time, though, you want to define it as X, and that's where I'm saying, you can wrap your hands around whatever that means. It's interesting. We just got off a call with Jeffy Mickey and Martin of Brand X Method and Keegan, and we're ruminating on this point. So I'm glad you brought it up. Is like, we have to really step outside of our own bubble and say, well, what is successful? Well, you should always start with who's the person we're talking to, i.e. the 20-year-old
Yeah.
or someone who's 75, and then context,
Yeah.
right? So, because, fitness looks like success, right? Everyone's
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm so successful. My gym's so successful. It's like, well, what are you defining as success?
Yeah.
Oh, we have workouts on the board. Oh, anyone can do that if that's what you define as success. Do you have retention of clients that's over 80%? No. Do your coaches make a 30-year career on that? Nope. Okay, you can go on the list, right? It's like, well,
Yeah.
what are we talking about here? What's our definition?
When, like, and the biggest thing in the last, year, especially for me, I've been hard at, and not trying to overwhelm myself, but like, defining success and trying to figure it out. Because to me, having some idea of an end goal is obviously pretty important, and
Mm-hmm.
like developing something and following it, and not so much, just aiming for whatever and then hoping it
Yeah,
comes out.
yeah.
But success has been one of those things that, you get asked, and it's like, that's a hard question. I don't know what success looks like. And,
Yes.
you look up to people, and you look at, what makes them successful, or what is the definition of success for them. And that's why, in terms of like, you speaking specifically about fitness, like individualization is key, and then meeting someone where they're at. And then in terms of, life, just meeting someone where they're at and finding out what their success of, or their definition of success is. And that's what kind of brings us all together. And I think, early on, that's what I was missing, because, in terms of fitness, from what I was looking at, I watch basketball, I do jujitsu, like I'm heavy in professional athletes, and like watching that is like, damn, that's impressive. Like the way these people move, the way they express fitness. And then working with the people I work with is like, well, why wouldn't they want to express themselves in that way? And then it's like, wait, they don't have to, that's not their life. And it was hard for me for a couple of years to like figure that out and be like, yeah, not everyone should be like doing this stuff. Like they don't want to, and they shouldn't. And
Yeah.
like, I would never force anything on anybody, but sometimes I was like, why wouldn't they want that? Like, why wouldn't they want this certain level in their life? And like, you just learn, and you're like, yeah, I mean, that's how it is. And that's where you got to meet them where they're at. And like, it's crazy sometimes, because you just, like I said, you're so um, early on. And I'm sure you experienced this when you were younger. You were like, oh, this is the way. And then like it didn't work, or people weren't catching on, and you were just like, oh, well, maybe this isn't the way. I don't really know what's next. But it's crazy. And, you know, leading into teaching coaches, and like I said, you probably had your growth period from a very young age, and then, you started figuring it out. When did CCP become a thing? And, why did you start it, and what did you kind of see that was missing to start it?
Yeah. I don't know if I had recognized there was a void that needs to be filled.
Hmm.
It was maybe, I would call it 15 years of experience in coaching.
Was there anybody doing what you were doing at the time? Like, was there certifications at like when?
Oh, definitely. I can't name them, but I know it was happening because
Yeah.
it was a thing that was necessary to create
Mhm.
structure. Really, no one was doing it in the way that I was doing it, like how I colored it.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's probably unique to everyone who did that, but it answers your question a little bit. But I had been doing this thing called coaching for 15 years, and I had now developed a scale of systems, success as we were defining it, from like client autonomy and clients showing up more and more over time, being like, yeah, I just want to like chat with you. It's great to check up. I don't have any major issues with my design. I'm pretty compliant in my
Mhm.
exercise. I just want some changes, right? Like teach me a new one arm row, or teach me that hang power clean thing I saw other people like. These are the biggest hurdles we had to overcome with clients over time, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this is great, right? This is the definition of success. People are just coming. We're all together. We're just sharing this thing. But people could pretty much do shit on their own over time.
Yeah.
So, and then of course you get lots of then you become a coached coach just based upon age, right?
Yeah.
Indirectly in your business. And then that started to spread out as technology grew and information was shared, right? So I was very fortunate to be born in 74 and my business beginning around 2000,
Okay.
where now
Yeah.
information could be spread out, right? That's luck. That's pure luck. No intentions based upon that, right? And I own that. So, but the thing is that that's what led to a lot of people asking the questions, and I'm making it short here, but like, why are you so happy? Why do you really enjoy this? I can't understand why you love figuring out these solutions to like physical expression. Because so many people just thought of it as folly and a diversion tactic from the day to day. And they come into OPT and they're like, there's this fucking energy. Like, I don't know what it is, but you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm talking about is a feeling, right? There's a feeling around that. Anyways, that's, just more and more people just kept asking those questions.
Yeah.
And I was like,
filled it. Yeah.
I should probably sit back and go, now what really makes this successful?
Yeah.
And I had those aha moments and like this opportunity to pause, which I've had for the past number of years, which has been unbelievable in terms of like what my mind can come up with for structuring these kind of ideas that's helped CCP. But if the original idea was to pause and go, what's the structure that would make that definition of success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's what it was. You got to have some form of business concept, right? Around how this thing fits into the zeitgeist, right? In the offerings, et cetera. Now, as you know, that's really complex, but you got to have something, right?
Yeah.
Accounting, marketing, language, whatever, right? You got to have the ability to build relationships and everything inside of that. Communication. And I like to say if there's like 1,000 levels of knowledge inside of behavior, we tackle like up to 21. Like it's that complex, but at least we tackle it. Relationship building, behaviors, mindset, all that kind of stuff. You need to be really good at that. And you need to be able to know yourself as a coach and who you are as a human and what kind of things are inside of you that start that whole process of creating the dyad, right? And the relationship between another person. Next, you need to be able to assess people. So look at it in a clear eye, kind of take a pause second and go, that's probably what I'm observing to be your ability right now. That's where I think your ability is right now. And then if you get really keen on that, you can now, of course, test this all over time to see interventions and how they make an impact. You can also then lead to what the next big area was. How do you put together designs, right? Put together a behavior, exercise, nutrition design is based upon that intake and assessment. And we teach that now, design. And we also teach the aspect of lifestyles, basic lifestyle guidelines, nourishment, nutrition. How do you wrap all that together and take care of it so that it's basically self-care of the system. So we have these 5 pillars really that I thought, I was like, you know what? I would teach those 5 things if I was to answer the question, like, what would make a coach successful? While thinking at the time, this was, Brandon, and then you asked, this was an intention too, is that I said, what will also be necessary to act as a heuristic that will stand the test of time for those principles? Because that's one thing that was an intention. I knew that tech was growing. I knew we were going to be faced against this dehumanization of coaching over time. So I did have intentions of pushing like relationships, individualization, etc. And now you know where my biases lie based upon that.
And I think that learning the way that you put it together, and I'm sure that now is, and every iteration from here on out is the best version of what you've done. And like, obviously maybe your first version was not, as in depth as this one, because you learn as you go, but like just dealing with that. And like I said, the CCP was kind of the first, I want to say certification that I took, or, way that in which I heard fitness from. The fitness was almost last. And like, even in the way that you structured the first, the iteration that I did of CCP right before the new one came out, fitness was like the last thing we went over. Programming was the last thing you talk about. It was one of the
Yeah.
longest, but it was also one of the last things, because
Mhm.
you can't get there until you've done the work before. You can't get there until you have learned about this person. You can't get there until you've assessed this person. You can't get there until you know how to build a system, track that system, where are your clients coming from, who are they coming from, why are they coming to you, and learning all of that. And that's been, the biggest thing, because for me early on, it was, all right, I need to know everything I need to know about fitness. And like, I need to know how to do this to the highest degree, how to program the best, how to periodize the best, how to make sure that, all this stuff that I was trying to learn. And it wasn't that was going to make me successful as an owner or me successful as a trainer. It was these other details. It's learning how to, learn about somebody and actually ask the questions. Assessment was something that like I knew about, but never implemented in the way that you guys taught. And then even in terms of the business stuff, like I listen to business stuff, but like, I never tried to track anything. And like, I never tried to, and, like I said, part of the conversations I've had with some of these awesome people, and they're, like I said, there are people who are successful in terms of, the fitness industry and making a name for themselves, but they all had that in the beginning. It was all, I didn't track anything. I just thought I was making more money and that was it. And then, a lot of people were like, I ended up trading way more time than the money that I was getting. And like, they had to juggle that and be like, all right, well now I actually look at this. And it's awesome to have people like OPEX, like yourself, who are teaching this and like teaching the almost things that should be taught a little bit younger in your life. Like I think
Yeah.
everyone should learn how to balance a checkbook, learn all that
Yeah.
stuff.
I
But,
agree.
having the opportunity to learn from people in your field and, be better at making these fundamental principles, not even just the fitness stuff, but like actual principles of business and life, are what's necessary to kind of, grow and see that change over time.
Mhm.
And in terms of growing, quarantine has been obviously nuts, but you guys have positioned yourself, and I know I positioned myself well by developing online stuff, developing a way to coach anybody in person or online and have that,
Yeah.
have the confidence that I can do that well.
Mhm.
How have you guys kind of adapted and changed over quarantine? And, has it really affected you? Has it helped you grow? Has it, just kind of dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I should reiterate again the language. It's not, we didn't position ourselves. We were already in the digital space.
Yeah.
So we're just lucky when that happened. We're like, well, we're online and we know how to operate it. We have for over decades.
Yeah.
So you can ask us questions if you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but you said you positioned yourself. We didn't position it. We were fortunate and lucky that we were in that space, right? So, and
Yeah, I
if
mean,
we,
it's still, I guess I consider it, I say position because, you guys did have the idea. It was it was kind of like and I don't know if your main thing was to ever go online. Was that something that you guys early on were thinking of or no?
no,
Oh
no.
yeah. All right. Then yeah. So yeah, it was just, but yeah, continue.
Yeah, no, you know how I feel about the online thing. Even
Yeah.
in my education, it just, it's, I always have tension in my own head, like coaches are listening to me, but inside I'm like, I wish we could all be in a room.
Yeah.
There's something very powerful around that.
Yeah.
That feeling that you get from seeing people's eyes and like hearing the humor and the little interjections, and everyone's focused on one particular topic. There's a lot of power to that.
Yeah.
Anyways, what were your thing? Oh, positioning, yeah,
Yeah.
COVID. Oh yeah, that whole COVID thing.
Yeah.
Geez. Well, let's just look at the three big buckets of stuff we do, and I'll make it pretty quick, and then you may have some questions after based upon that. But
Yeah.
our individual design concept was inside of our OPEX gyms, okay, around the world. And so if you have a really good individual relationship built up inside those gyms, then if you take down the walls and say you can't go to those gyms, you could obviously see that it wasn't too hard to transition over. If the gym
Yeah.
was just like, oh, the lights are off, you can't come in, then we're like, okay, well, I still am connecting with you all the time because we have an individual relationship, right?
Yeah.
So all we had to really do was manage the cost value of that, and it worked out fine. Okay.
Great.
um, and it didn't work out perfectly in some instances, but those were other things that were just bound to happen anyway. So it just kind of did that. We had operated also on an online athlete mode concept, so that was giving programs to athletes out there who were just wanting to like get to their highest level of physical potential. most times in fitness, but generally in that like real serious mode of
Yeah.
person who is fitnessing and exercising. And so that was already online. So it's like, oh, we'll just continue what we're doing. We'll just operate, oh, you don't have a gym. Okay, we'll do your shit at home. Or you only have a tire. Okay, we'll give you some workouts. So it was still, fully operational to
Yeah.
basically do that. And then lastly, digital education has been inside of it for a long period of time. So
Yeah.
we had some rises in interest just due to the fact that it's like, hey, we've been here for a while and we know how to operate this. You got some free time on your hands, then maybe you could like talk with me for the next number of months.
Yeah.
So it's been pretty good, Brandon, over that period of time. If I was to only reflect on the lens of like how has business been,
Yeah.
you say, well, what are your big pillars, big dogs, gyms, and OPEX education? It's all been good because of how we've, cemented what our beliefs are inside each of those, right?
Yeah.
But I want to be very careful to say that that was intentional. We're just lucky that that kind of just worked out this time. And we're just fortunate and really happy that we could actually share some of the things that we know so that people can learn and get through this difficult time.
Yeah. What about you? How have you, taken this quarantine and kind of grown or seen value from it? I know a lot of people, and I've seen from your Instagram, spend more time with your family is probably a great thing, and being able to kind of go do those things. For me, it was able to give me a step back and kind of relax, which I think a lot of people needed in a lot of ways. But, for you specifically, what were kind of the things that you took away from it? Or if you're still in it, I mean, people are still technically in it. I don't know if Idaho or Arizona, but
Yeah, no, I think we're all still taking things away from it, and I appreciate you asking the question. I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about that question, so I appreciate it. But I do, and I'm immediately saying I want to say back to you what you reflected on how it's probably perceived on what I've been doing. But I've been great. I don't know
yeah.
any other way to describe it. I've been thinking about things like my children's social and mental health.
Hmm.
I think that's been a little bit more, closer to what's on my train of thought. I've been thinking about the relationship with my wife, and how we've been. It's great that we had this embedded, really, I would call it a positive, growth connection for a long time. So now
Yeah.
that we have this, we like each other and we like spending time together. And now it's like, oh, this is probably a positive thing now for the rest of our life. So it was a nice point to be like, yeah, I really like you and I like spending time with you and we can do more of it. And
Yeah.
it's kind of nice. So it's, on that reflection too, it's been another like iteration of a real deep appreciation I have to being autonomous in my own fitness journey,
Yeah.
and being 46 and still experiencing fitness. I really enjoy the fact that I am in my own mind an authority figure for the sharing of knowledge of my experiences.
Yeah.
And this is another opportunity for me to see how grateful I am that I can still exercise and still do that every day and love it and still be creative and enjoy it like I'll do after my call with you. I'm excited to kind of think about some things I want to do and express myself
Yeah.
physically. So that's been something too that I really like. I just love the fact that I have those embedded characteristics that I have had for a long period of time. So I'll stop there, but those are some things
Cool.
that.
Do you have any like current fitness goals that you're chasing, or is it just kind of just learning and just moving and getting
Yeah,
better?
yeah, not really. And I just want to spend
No
a
more
second
CrossFit games?
to make sure. Um, these are the overarching ones. I want to do something every day. I want to be consistent with it such that I can continually do it for the rest of my life every day. Um, I want to still experience new things. Like a couple of two things that I want to experience is going really long and also improving my relative gymnastics and body weight awareness.
Hmm.
So those are embedded things inside of the inside of the program that's on the periphery, but I am like they are there, right?
Yeah.
It's not like I'm not like, maybe I'll bike for 4 hours today and see what that's like. It's like, no, that's something that I've intended that I want to learn
Hmm.
and see what it feels like, how to fuel for what happens when it's hot, what happens when you get a backwind, on the way back? All the learnings that come inside of that haven't been inside my fitness experience for a while. So those are my goals really right
Cool.
now.
Awesome. I have a couple more questions just to kind of like wrap this all up, but mainly, after everything, where, you've been in the industry for 25 years now, where do you kind of see the future of it going? Where do you see kind of things playing out? And after all of this, because this was a change that I don't think a lot of people saw coming, and like everyone's adapting and they're trying to change and they're trying to grow. Where do you, as being there from basically the beginning and like kind of a huge beginning part of like the online stuff and getting more into that to where it is going to be in, the next 2, 3, 4, or 5 years?
Yeah. Well, on the back end of this, I really don't think much will change,
Yeah.
to be completely honest. And of course, that probably takes a whole other episode. But I just don't think the behaviors were inside as a base support in the fitness market to really, really think this is going to be revolutionary as to what's just going on right now as a change. That's another point. But what connects to that too, is that you talk about futuristic things and thinking about Moore's law. I'm glad you said 2, 3, 4 years as opposed to like, how about 15 years, James? Because stuff happens so quickly now just due to technology and technology, information, and just the connection of all those things for the past 20 years. It's been an unbelievable hockey stick improvement in changes of how we garner all that. So I think you have to say, well, that is what leads the question of a futuristic or any form of predictions. And what I would say is just one area, because this can get really long, is the people that are inside of the fitness arena are going to have to push up against the dehumanization of the fitness relationship process.
Yeah.
I think that's an impending, it's really important. And I only think there's a few people that find it really important as a topic. And the reason why I know that is that the more I look out there and not make any comments on anything, I can see that people are even unintentionally pushing something for the growth of education or the coach or whatever, or even a concept in fitness, but they don't even see that they're inside of that system being dangled to push their entire thing towards a dehumanization process. So my belief in fitness is that, there has to be a relationship. That's the bottom line. So and that's where I stick. That's where I put my stake in the ground. And I'm very open to say, everyone knows why my biases are that way, right? I teach education, right? I teach education to teach coaches to get those principles in their mind. So I believe there's a coach and I believe there's a client, and I believe that the relationship needs to be really like worked on over the next number of years as to what that looks like. And we're leading more and more towards this, right? And I just think we need to spend a lot more time on being ready for that. And there's a number of other things, but I'll just stop at that one because that's a big one.
Yeah. And I think that, in terms of, the communication is a huge thing, and like being able to better build a relationship is hard. And I think right now there's so much, there's problems with communication. There's problems with being able to kind of express yourself in certain ways and be able to have conversations with people, because there's so, like you said, there is this distance growing between people. And like, especially with, quarantine, it's like you don't get to see people and you're just even farther. And then some people are just continuously dragging apart. And it's tough.
And their form of communication has changed. Like in 30 years, how people communicate is not for better, in my opinion. We have possibly half of the entire population that thinks that, a text or a tweet is a form of communication. And that, we got to spend some time thinking about that commentary.
Yeah. And I mean, even myself, I've grown up with it. So it's been basically like, I've made, obviously phone calls are still a part of my life, but like texting's been a huge thing, and messaging and chatting and things like that. That's been, a big part of like communication for me growing up. So, conversation is, something I have had to get better at. And, the talks with getting to know people a little bit better, asking those questions, being a little bit more in depth, because it does get surface level when it's just texting. It does get, you don't see the other person. You're not seeing how they're reacting. You're not able to see emotion. You're not able to express your emotion as well. Things can be taken wrong. Things can be said differently, but you meant something else.
Yeah.
And that's why, in terms of growing, communication is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Last thing I want to talk about, I think this is really cool. I don't know if you've always done this, but
Mm.
the hashtag of I'm assuming that's a number of workouts you've done.
Yeah.
That's awesome. When did you kind of start that? And when,
Well,
I
I've
guess
always
just
done the
kind of like,
workouts, but I, I, I've always kept training logs too. There's been some iterations where there were some stopping points, but I can also always remember which workouts they were, where I was. And so I did a detailed inventory a couple of years ago based upon all my training logs and how many workout sessions I've had. And I started it off after in a rehabilitative state after my injury when I was 18, when I started to do my own little push-ups and lift weights in front of the
yeah.
mirror kind of thing on my own, right? And I detailed that every let's call it, front of the mirror with the sand weights, looking at my guns,
Hmm.
I was standing on one leg because there was so much pain and blood swelling in my injured leg. So I'm starting as that's the starting point of the transformation of me. I've tried to connect how many times I've done a particular session like that since that date. And I've tracked it up. I just passed 10,000 this
Yeah,
summer.
that's awesome.
And
I wasn't sure what it was at the beginning, and like I saw it as you went, and I was like, I wonder if that's the number of workouts. And then like I put two and two together, obviously as you kept adding it,
yeah,
and that makes a lot of sense. I guess one more question: what
yeah.
are your three kind of biggest tips or suggestions for those coming up in the industry? Someone who is a little bit younger and they're kind of like looking to make this a career. What are your three biggest things to look for and kind of utilize?
Yeah, I would say they probably have to. I'm not gonna maybe not put it into a list so you
Yeah,
can
yeah, yeah.
say that you want maybe, but I think the coach, which is now reflected actually, Brandon, which I'd ask you to do again, CCP. I'm not sure if the cost is super high for you to do it as a fellow, but it's a new style and you may appreciate it. Is that we've changed up what we find important, which is my first thing I would ask people to do, is that you really have to ask a whole lot of questions on yourself. So what we're trying to do in the front end to CCP now is to say, just like we did about all the things come before fitness, right?
Yeah,
Trying to get coaches to focus on them as humans.
yeah,
So I think the first thing I would ask people to do is recognize all your biases, recognize how you got to this point, recognize where do you sit even in the conversation of what a lived experience is today. What is life? What is, even contemplate and spend a little bit of time on that.
yeah.
Um, and ask all those things to create the best version of yourself and how you perceive this thing before you even get to the education. I would ask coaches to do that. Why are you doing exercise? Why do you eat a certain way? Why do you behave a certain way? And the reason why you need to focus on all three areas, because that's what I'm going to teach you in CCP. So,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. That could be first and foremost. So go there. Secondly, I would say to dig in and fall in love with fitness expression.
Yeah.
Like discover shit, know what it's like to hike for 8 hours with a 40-pound pack. Know what it's like to get pinned under a clean when 8 people are watching you, judging you.
Yeah.
Like all these fitness experiences need to actually be practiced in order for you to connect them to what is being a technical fix for the clean, or like what foot shit you need to do to prepare for the 8
Yeah.
hour hike. You know what I'm saying? So you gotta fucking love fitness, man. You gotta be in it and doing it. And
Yeah.
I'm not talking about addiction. I'm talking about experiences, right? Like get in there and get dirty and kind of figure it out and play and fall in love with it.
That's my biggest thing, experience, is just being able to, as a coach, you got to be able to, it doesn't mean you have to suffer to a certain degree, but like you should be at the forefront of whatever it is that you're trying to do, or at least experiencing it in some way, because there's too many people out there that are giving information on stuff they either haven't tried or,
Yeah.
or have just read about. And like in
Yeah.
terms of, growing and experience, it's the only way you're going to learn. That's the only way you're going to give the best product moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. I think of words like absolutism that gets locked inside of there, that people think they need to be like, geez, I'm not going to touch jujitsu if I'm not going to get a black belt. It's like, that's
Yeah.
the fucking wrong answer to not get started.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't do jujitsu, but I say in my mind, I do with my girls, right?
Yeah.
Like we rough house and roll around and pin each other and do shit. I'm doing it, of course, with intentions deep behind on
Yeah.
their preservation and security and their own strength and body awareness, etc. But just because we're not in a micro gym facility and people don't have the stuff on, I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? So don't be afraid of experimenting, experiencing with that. So that's my second one. And just to fill this, because you asked for three, I would say to set aside time every day that's locked in a schedule that no one can interrupt you and that you take for yourself to learn. And that learning could come in multiple different forms. But as the coach gets going and is like deep in the trenches, you really need to have those planned periods of not seeking anymore, but seeking knowledge. Not seeking anymore as in like going out and exploring, experiencing fitness or coaching it.
Yeah.
You gotta like learn. You gotta like stick in front of a 2 hour, as an example, for no particular reason, but I was listening to a podcast this morning from Jordan Peterson on stories and meta stories.
Yeah.
Right. And you can be like, well, why in the fuck would you learn that as a fitness coach? Is that you can understand that when you take those 2 hours to learn, when you step away from that afterwards, because it's planned, you see that you did it for yourself. So it's a form of self-care, right? You also get into a parasympathetic state, which is great for you in overall balance.
Yeah.
And now you come out on the other side with these embedded principles you can use to share stories, using Jordan Peterson's example, right?
Yeah.
Like the power of stories, right? Like maybe you're going to be able to use what you've learned inside of that the next day to a client when they don't get something. But then you say, well, this is one of my own personal stories, right? And then all of a sudden they're like, I get it.
Yeah.
So you can see how it connects everything based upon you taking time for that 2 hours, if I'm making sense.
Yeah.
Right?
No, definitely. Yeah.
So that's what I would say is a third thing people should start.
What are some of the things that you usually do? Is that like, that you use to learn? Like,
For
I know
learning?
for like, what are some of the things that you turn to?
Yeah, I think I do a good job of just contemplation, meditation, and just sitting. I think there's a debrief component of learning that people forget about.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks it's just action oriented, but I do a lot of sitting and reflecting and contemplation. So that's one. I would call it a voracious reader and listener. So I listen to lots of podcasts and I read a lot, and I think that's what I probably do specifically to learn.
Awesome. Well, that was a lot. That was awesome. I definitely appreciate you sitting down. I hope everybody took a lot away from that. And if you guys have any questions, you can definitely reach out. If you want to give these guys a brief kind of rundown of where they can find you and the OPEX stuff.
Yeah. On Instagram, JFitzOPEX, JFITZOPEX, because that's generally where I'm spending most of my time, mainly on the exercise portion, but you'll know what I'm up to, and you can somehow indirectly, falsely stay connected through that. And then opexfit.com, OPEXFIT.com. We got all kinds of free resources for people, no matter where they sit. You're just a consumer, or you're a fitness coach, or you're just someone who's interested in what we're up to based on what I said, then go there.
Yeah, cool. All right. I got a couple questions I want to ask you off the podcast, but I appreciate you sitting down. If you guys have any questions, I appreciate you guys for listening. Reach out to me. I will see you guys next time. Peace.